إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهدي الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أما بعد. Okay, brothers, there you had a very short chronology of the Crusades, and really, you know, somebody like Salahuddin, again, we can't speak about him in 45 minutes. It's unjust to just speak about everything that was related to him in just 45 minutes. But we can speak again, we can pick an aspect of his life. So today we are not going to discuss the Crusades and, you know, the type of battles that occurred and so on and so forth, but we have taken something from his personality. And some of the tapes that are used for this is a set of, again, there were a set of 4 tapes on Salahuddin Ayyubi by one of the scholars, I forgot his name, I don't recall his name now, but one of the scholars, he compiled these tapes. And one side of one tape was about his personality, from which I've tried to take some benefits so that we can maybe reflect on that. So, first of all, who is Salahuddin? What is his name? His name Sultan Salahuddin. This is his name, Salahuddin Abu al-Muzaffar Yusuf ibn al-Amir Najmuddin Ayyub ibn Shadi ibn Marwan ibn Yaqub ad-Duwaini then at-Takriti. He was born in the year 544 after Hijri, which corresponds to 1137 Christian era. And his father, whose name was Najmuddin, he used to love him as a boy. You know, Salahuddin, he used to like him a lot. And he used to, it's recorded that he used to play ball with him as well. The historians, they recorded that he used to love his son, used to play ball with him. And from the early age, he sent Salahuddin to the halaqat of ilm, to the study circles of knowledge with the scholars, until Salahuddin, you know, he perfected the Arabic language, and he also became from the fuqaha, from the jurists of the Shafi'iyya, of the Shafi'i madhab. So he was a scholar in his right as well. He wasn't just a mujahid, but he was a scholar as well. And this is very important, because when a person, you know, he is waging a jihad, or any time he does an act of worship, he should be aware of all the rulings with regards to that act of worship. And if he is a mujahid or a commander, then he should be aware of all the aspects, that who is he allowed to kill, who is not allowed to kill, what are the rules governing peace, and what are the rules governing war, and so on and so forth. As for his characters, in terms of his mercy, one of the things that he did for the Muslims was that previous to him coming to power, the Fatimiyya dynasty, they imposed a lot of taxes on the Muslims. The Islamic State, or the Fatimiyya, they imposed many taxes. You know, even taxes for small things, buying, selling, you have to pay tax. You want to do anything you want to do, you have to pay a tax, and the tax would go to the government. So when Salahuddin came, he removed, you know, most of these taxes to make it easy for the people. So he took away most of these taxes for the Muslims. In terms of his bravery, he used to accompany soldiers to the front line. He wouldn't just, you know, sit in the back in his tent and just give the orders, but he would be there with his armies at the front. And it's also narrated that during the siege of Akka, one night 70 ships of the Crusaders, they came between Asr and Maghrib. And Salahuddin, he didn't like panic and think, oh, you know, the ships are coming, you know, let's run, let's do something. He saw the ships coming, and very peacefully, you know, he just counted them one by one from Asr to Maghrib, 1, 2, 3, 4, until all 70 ships came of the Crusaders. Then the Muslims, they had a battle on that day with the Christians, and the Muslims, they had to make a tactical withdrawal. So Salahuddin, he took the Muslims to the mountain, They regrouped on the mountain and they came and attacked the Crusaders, and they won on the same day. And that day of that battle was a very, it was a very difficult day. And it's narrated that, it was rainy and it was windy, and he was in his tent, from where he was, commanding the battle as well, from his tent. And the historian who mentioned this, he said that, if you just think about it, that he was, at that time he was one of the leaders of the Muslims, and he could have been sitting back in his palace with his family, enjoying with his, with his wives, with his children, having expensive food. But he preferred to leave that and to go and live in that tent, on that rainy and windy night. That is what he got his pleasure from. And it said that it was so rainy and windy that, some of his soldiers, they were even concerned that the tent might blow away, or fall down or something like that. So this shows, his bravery and how much he was like, he was a soldier in his own right as well. It wasn't just giving the orders. In terms of his patience, when his son Ismail died, and he received the news that his son Ismail died, he didn't tell anybody. He didn't express his grief to anybody. He didn't go to people and say, "Oh, my son's died, my son's died, my son's died." He didn't tell anyone, and he just contained his grief, within himself. And the only way that the people could see his sadness was, some tears that, came, that rolled down his face. But other than that, he didn't, that was the only way you could tell that he was hurt, or grieved by the death of his son. But from verbally, he didn't make any expression of his grief. And this is really these are really the characteristics of the real men. You see that, how their complaints and their sorrows, they're only to Allah, not to the creation. He was also, as a ruler, he was also very, very tolerant. And what used to happen is that, as a ruler of the Muslims, the people, they would come to him, as the governor of the Muslims, the people, they would come to him with their complaints. And you can imagine that, he is the ruler of the Muslims, and he's sitting down on his mat, and all these angry people, they are, who are living in the country, the Muslims, they are coming to complain to him. So as the people, they are coming, some people, they're stepping on his clothes, some people, they're soiling, they're dirtying his carpet that he's sitting on. Some people, they're speaking to him rudely, because this is the ordinary people. He wasn't like living in his palace and saying, "Listen, if you want to speak to me, don't come to me directly, go to one of my ambassadors, and you make your complaint to him." No, you could come to him directly and make your complaint. So the people would come, and all types of people, some people being rude, some people don't know how to speak to him. And this type of behavior, you need a lot of patience for it. It's not easy. It is very difficult. If you are the Amir or the Khalifa, and people are coming to you and are accusing you of maybe some things that you haven't done. That, "Oh, you don't do this, you don't do that, you're being unjust, my family hasn't had this for this much time or that much time." And in the past, some of the Muslim rulers, you couldn't say that to them. If you dare say something like that to any one of, even today, if you go to any of the rulers in the Muslim countries and just speak your mind, nobody's going to hear about you, very soon. That'll be the end of you. But he used to listen very, very patiently. He used to listen quietly. Even if they dirtied his clothes, whatever, he'd just listen, "Okay, what have you got to say?" And he would, attend to everyone's affairs. Because he knew that as being the ruler of the Muslims, this is something that he will be answerable to Allah on the Day of Judgment. So he looked at it as a responsibility for which he's answerable, rather than, a high status with which he could look down upon the people. In terms of his chivalry, the English historian Mill, he narrates that when Al-Quds was captured, when Salahuddin, he captured Jerusalem, the Crusaders who were who had to flee, they fled, and they went to the nearby city or country of Antioch. And that was also ruled by a fellow Christian, and they went to him, and they thought that, okay, that now we've gone to a fellow Christian country, they'll look after us. And what did the ruler of Antioch do? He saw these Crusaders had come, they had just lost the battle of Jerusalem, they come to him asking for help. He robbed them, he took their own money. He was a Christian as well, he robbed them of their money, and he kicked them out, said, "Get out of here," kicked them out of his country. After he took all their wealth and all that, said, "Get out." So they started cursing, this ruler. These Christians, they're thinking, look at this. We came to him, our fellow Christian brother. He stole our money. We're hungry, we're tired, and he treated us like this. And some of them, they were like starving. They were, they had women, they had children, and their own ruler, he booted them out like that. So what did they do? They returned to Salahuddin. And he looked after them, gave them, Muslim, hospitality, looked after them, attended to their needs, gave them food, whatever, they needed. Another Western historian, Stanley Lane Poole, he says that if the taking of Jerusalem were the only fact known about Saladin, they used to call him Saladin, it were enough to prove him the most chivalrous and great-hearted conqueror of his own and perhaps of any age. This is a non-Muslim. This was a disbeliever. This is what he's saying about Salahuddin. It's not a Muslim, who saw Salahuddin as a hero. This was a disbeliever. He was saying that if that was the only thing that we knew many things about him, but if we just knew that how he took Jerusalem, this was enough. Also, after one of the battles, what happened was that there was one woman, one of the Christian women, she was running through, through the crowds and crying, loudly, screaming and crying. So the Muslims, the soldiers, they went to her, they said, what's the problem? And she said, my young daughter, I've lost my daughter. So Salahuddin, the news reached him, and he was very sad, because he saw that her daughter is lost. He didn't say, okay, she's just a Christian, who cares? But he became concerned, and he became very sad at this. So he told his soldiers, go and look for the daughter of this woman. So they went and they searched, and I think they found out that in one of the particular markets or whatever, that his daughter had been sold to some Muslim or something like that. So he went and he paid for, he paid the price of that daughter, and so that he was the owner of her, and then he released her free and gave her to her mum, and her mother became happy that she was reunited with her daughter. So these are like these are examples of which are very rare. So you see that on one hand he's the liberator of Jerusalem, he's the man who is striking terror into the hearts of the disbelievers, but at the same time he's the one who has got mercy, who is looking after the Christians when their own rulers, they turn the blind eye to them. Also his arch enemy, Richard the Lionheart of England, the King of England, when he was sick, when he was ill, Salahuddin, he sent him fruits and snow, ice. They had snow collected. I don't know how they collected it and transported it, but he sent fruits and ice for Richard the Lionheart, to help him get better. And that is like his enemy. And when the Muslims, they took Jerusalem, when they took Al-Quds, Salahuddin, he appointed Muslim soldiers, and the Christians, they were allowed to leave under Muslim guard. They were like Muslim soldiers on either side, that nobody can touch them. Salahuddin, he guaranteed them the safe passage, that now you are all free to leave. And the Muslims, they were guarding them on either side, that nobody should touch them, because the ruler has guaranteed their safety. We've taken the city and they should be allowed to leave in peace. Also, we find that Salahuddin, he was a very cultured individual, a very refined type of personality. For instance, he had memorized all the Arab lineages. He had memorized all the Arab lineages. Like all the Arab family trees, that this family comes from that tribe comes from that tribe comes. All of these tribes, he had memorized them. He knew of them. He knew their history. The history of the Arabs. Not only that, but he also knew the lineage of the Arab horses. He could tell you that which are the different types of Arab horses, and which are the different various breeds, and which horse is which type, and what is the strength of each type of horse, and so on and so forth. So you could see that he was aware of the things around him as well, relating to Jihad and relating to the creation of Allah. In terms of, for example, the wonders of the world and the strange things of the world, he liked to, he was interested in those. He liked to know about those type of things as well. And there's no harm in doing that if a person, he does it with the intention of knowing about the creation of Allah and what the various type of things that Allah has created. in the dunya to affect his iman. In terms of his attitude towards the worldly life, then he had what they call in Arabic as zuhud. And zuhud, the best translation of zuhud is indifference. Many people, they misunderstand zuhud. They think that zuhud means to be poor and to live in a poor way. That's not the meaning of zuhud. Zuhud means to be indifferent to it. Like Imam Ahmad, he was asked once that if somebody has something like 100,000 dirhams or dinars, can we say that he has got zuhud? If he's so rich, can we still say that he has got zuhud? That he has got indifference to the dunya? And Imam Ahmad said yes. If that money increases, he doesn't rejoice a lot, and if he loses that money, he doesn't grieve for it. It doesn't affect him. Then we can say that he has got zuhud. So you could be a millionaire, and tomorrow somebody phones you and tells you, okay, your business transaction was successful and you've made another million. And if you are a person of zuhud, you will just say, okay, alhamdulillah, no big deal. And the next day somebody rings you and says, oh, we've had a major failure in all the businesses and you've lost all your millions. Says, okay, alhamdulillah, Allah has decreed that for me, no problem. That is the example of someone who has zuhud. He could be a billionaire, but his attitude is like that. And at the same time, you might have someone who's poor, who might just have, 10, 15 pounds in his pocket, but even if he loses 10 pence of that, he becomes really sad and upset. Oh, I lost 10 pence, And at the same time, if he gets £1 from somewhere, he becomes really happy and rejoices. So it's possible for a rich person to have zuhud and a poor person not to have zuhud. And once, some people in Damascus, they built a beautiful house for Salahuddin. Beautiful house. They said, Salahuddin, he will live in this house. Beautiful house. So Salahuddin, he came, when they came, they said, come and see the house that we've built for you because we want you to live in this house. He came. He just looked quickly at the house. He didn't stare at it for a long time. He just came. He just gave a little glance to it. And then he just said to the people that I will never live in this house. I will never sit in this house. And the people, they were astonished because they had specially built this house for him. They thought he's going to come, he's going to, praise the house. He's going to be happy that he can live in this house. He just took a quick look at it and he said, I don't want to live in this house. And he said, because this type of house is not for the person who is seeking the death. And we are here in the service of Allah. I'm a person who is seeking death, and this type of house, it might affect my desire for death. And I'm here in this dunya as someone who is in the service of Allah. And also one of his famous statements is that he used to say that in front of my eyes, or in my opinion, gold and turab, which is dirt or dust, is the same. Now you might think that, okay, alright, it might be a fancy statement, but what's the big deal that gold and turab is the same? It's a nonsensical statement. How can you say that in your opinion, money and this soil outside in the forest is the same for you? But what did he mean? But if you listen to his reason, then you'll understand that it's the correct reason. He said, in my opinion, gold and dirt has the same value as long as the man will leave the gold and become dirt. That's what he meant. As long as we will all leave our gold and become dirt, this gold has got no value for me. Okay? Because when will this gold not become dirt? In the akhirah. That's the only time when the gold you will have there will stay gold forever. But in this dunya, even if you have tons and tons and tons of gold, one day you will leave that gold and you will become dirt. And he said, as long as this will be the situation, in other words, as long as I'm in the dunya, gold and dirt is the same thing for me. When he died, they say that the money that was left in his treasures, in his own personal treasures, you couldn't even pay zakat on it. It didn't even reach the nisab. In Sharia, you have to have a certain amount of money before zakat is even obligatory on you. And it is said that Salahuddin, as the ruler of the Muslims, he did not have enough money himself. They didn't find enough money on which zakat was obligatory. Something like 47 dirhams, which is like 47 silver coins, and I think some narrations even said one coin of gold. He didn't leave behind any property to his name. He didn't leave behind any palace. So no property, no palace, no gardens, nothing. And if you read what the scholars they said, like if you read Siyar A'lam al-Nubala by the scholar Al-Dhahabi, he mentions that some of the scholars they said that it was ajib. This was like strange. That how can it be that somebody like him, that one of the kings, he was one of the kings of the Muslims, that when he died with what and he left something like what the prophets they leave. Because this type of thing you only hear about prophets leaving this type of hardly anything. When the Prophet ﷺ, he passed away, just a few clothes, or hardly anything. You could count it on your hands, what he left behind. But as for Salahuddin, one of the kings, this is really strange, because normally when kings die, people they kill them so that they can get what they leave behind. That's the reason normally a lot of kings are killed. So when he gets killed, I can have So for example, like when particular kings they die, I'm waiting to have his £10 million yacht and his 15 million pound jumbo jet, and I can't wait to get my hands on his palace near the coast, and I can't wait to have his holiday home in Europe, and I can't wait to get this, and I can't wait to. There's so many things you don't know which to choose. And also, he was a type of person that whether the Islamic State was going through good times or bad times, his spending would be equal. He used to spend generously on the Muslims, whether the Muslim state's finances were strong or weak. And in fact, he used to spend so openly that his own treasurers of the Islamic State, of the Baytul Mal, the money that was not his, that belonged to the state, he used to spend it on the Muslims. What they used to do was that they used to hide the money. They used to hide it from him, so that if he would come and say, okay, how much money in the treasures, and he found the truth, they knew he would just give it to the people. So they wouldn't tell him, because they said, let's keep some money in case we might need it, because the way this man, he's spending, we're going to be left with nothing for the Islamic State. Also, very, as I mentioned before, very open-handed, giving away clothes, giving away horses. It's recorded that he gave away 10,000 horses, because he used to consider himself as a soldier of Islam who one day would go to a battle and not come back. So that's why he didn't want to keep any of these things. He said, I'm going to be a soldier of Islam, I'm going to go, I'm not going to come back, so just take it, just distribute all these things. As for his love for jihad, the historians, they note that Salahuddin, he didn't used to find pleasure in anything, whether it's food or clothes or palaces, anything like that. He didn't used to find pleasure until the Muslim lands were freed. Because, for example, now you might think, okay, how can that happen? For example, if one of you, may Allah not let it happen, la qaddar Allah, but if one of your loved ones dies, imagine, one day one of your loved ones, one of your close relatives, passes away. You are not going to feel like eating, you are not going to feel like drinking, people are going to try and joke with you, you're not going to feel like joking, you'll just be in a different mindset. Which is one of the reasons why the Prophet ﷺ, he enjoined that, that when the Ja'far ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu, when he was shaheed, the Prophet ﷺ told the Sahaba that bring food to his family, because they have that which is distracting them. The martyrdom of Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, they are sad about that, so they are not cooking, they are not making food. And until today you find the Muslims, they do that when when somebody dies in a Muslim family, then you find other Muslims, they cook food, they give them food, because the person who is in that situation, his mind is not on food, and he's not interested in cooking, and maybe for the whole 1 or 2 days he doesn't eat anything. So Salahuddin, this was his attitude until the Muslim lands were freed. As long as the lands of Jerusalem and the other Muslim land was in the hands of the disbelievers, he didn't find any pleasure in anything. So you see how the situation of the Muslims used to take over his his mind. Also, Imam Al-Dhahabi, he said that in Salahuddin there was a determination in establishing jihad and annihilating his enemies, that which is unheard of. His determination in establishing jihad and annihilating the opponents is something which has not been heard of. Whether in his time or any other time, nobody has ever heard to the extent of how courageous he was, and how well he established the jihad, and how powerfully he defeated his enemies. In terms of his humbleness, when the Muslims they took Al-Quds, Salahuddin he suggested that we build an enclosure, around Al-Quds, and he said he will take the responsibility for building this enclosure. And he himself, he dug the trench, and he himself, he carried the rocks on his own shoulders, to build that enclosure. He didn't just say, okay, I've liberated Jerusalem, I'm going to now sit in my palace, and watch everything. Because he considered himself a servant of Islam. He didn't consider himself, as a king. He considered himself as a servant of Islam who is in the service of Allah, and that is his job. And similarly, in terms of adherence to the deen, we also find that Salahuddin, as a king, he did not overstep the commandments of Allah. For example, as we know that the Prophet ﷺ, he has forbidden gold and silk except to the women of this ummah. And how many Muslim kings they ignored that? And how many Muslim kings they wore rich silk robes and rich expensive gold adornments? And even today, some of the rulers of the Muslim countries, their robes, they are stitched with gold thread and so on and so forth. But he didn't do it because he knew that this is haram, that the Prophet ﷺ said that whoever desires gold and silk in this dunya, he will not wear it in the next. So he used to wear clothes, but only the clothes which were permissible, like ordinary linen and cotton. That's what he used to wear. Also, he used to avoid, gatherings of, frivolous gatherings. What do we mean by frivolous gatherings? Sometimes people, they congregate and they have like music going on, or somebody coming and, jester to crack jokes and all that, and everyone just sits and drinks tea and has a laugh and so on and so forth. He didn't used to like these type of gatherings. He didn't used to like these type of frivolous gatherings, and it's also said that I think apparently in those times people, they used to have court jesters, like somebody would come to make the king laugh and all that. And even though he would give his money, to people who needed it, but he would never give his money to jesters or people like that, because he didn't respect those type of people. Also, it's narrated that he would like to hear hadith with chains, with the full chain of narration. Now, I was not sure when I was reading this that what this is referring to. It could be referring to two things. It could either mean that if somebody narrated a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he wouldn't just accept that, the Prophet ﷺ said that, but he wants to hear that he heard it from such and such, who heard it from such and such, who heard it from such and such, who heard it from such and such, and so on and so forth, until he heard it from the Prophet ﷺ. In other words, the full chain of narration. This is one meaning. Another meaning is that he didn't like to hear hearsay. So if somebody came to him and said to him, for example, Richard the Lionheart is sick, then he won't just accept it. He'll say, okay, where did you hear it from? You'll say, I heard it from that person. Where did he hear it from? He heard it from that one. And this type of characteristic is very important, for somebody who one day might find himself as an Amir, or even as an ordinary Muslim. It's very important, because you can create a lot of fitna and fasad and corruption by not verifying reports. One day some brother might come to you and say, that brother, that brother, I saw him going out with a sister, on the street. And then you become angry, so, astaghfir, and that sister, she wasn't wearing hijab and so on and so forth, and that brother, he becomes, really angry, and he goes, astaghfirullah, I didn't expect somebody like that to do that. And he goes to that brother and he goes, how dare you go out, with this woman who is not covering herself, and you should be ashamed of yourself. But if he had found out, maybe he would have found out that was his sister who's not practicing, for example, or something like that. So always, to verify the reports, and to find out, where did you hear that from? Did you hear that yourself? Did you see the brother do it yourself? Oh no, somebody just told me that he was listening to music. I didn't actually see him myself, but I just heard it. And you go to that guy, brother, did you hear him? No, I didn't see him, but somebody was saying that, people were saying that. No, where did you hear it from? And if you can't verify the report, leave it. Also, one of the scholars, he said, or one of the narrators about his life, he said that I never saw him praying fara'id, obligatory prayers, except in jama'ah. except in Jama'ah, that I would never see him praying except in congregation. And this is something which is not easy. This is something which is not easy. Most of the Muslims, even practicing Muslims, they can't keep something like this up. And even the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned that, that this is a type of ribat, this is a type of guarding the frontiers as well. That making wudu, taking many steps to the mosque and waiting for one prayer after the next. And this is something which most people, they cannot do. But, we find extremes. On one hand, we find brothers who they might be enthusiastic about jihad and so on and so forth, but they don't have this love for the salah. And on the other hand, we find brothers who have this love for the salah, but they're not interested in jihad. So, for you, be the winner. Don't look at those brothers who are interested in jihad and they don't follow this up, or those brothers who are into the salah but they don't follow the jihad up. You try to be a winner. Salahuddin, he took both. He took his, he did his ribat in the mosques, and he did his, guarding the frontiers in the mosques, and he guarded his frontiers on the front lines of the Muslim borders. As for the death of Salahuddin, it was in the fortress of Damascus after Fajr on Wednesday, the 27th of Safar, the month of Safar, the year 589 Hijri Islamic calendar, which corresponds to 1193 Christian era, at the age of 55. And Abu Ja'far al-Qurtubi, he said that he was reciting the Quran and he completed reciting the verse, Huwa Allahu alladhi la ilaha illahu alimul ghaybi wa shahadati huwa ar-Rahmanur Rahim, which is Surah Al-Hashr, verse 22, which means that He is Allah besides whom there is no other God, alimul ghaybi wa shahada, the knower of the unseen and the apparent, huwa ar-Rahmanur Rahim, He is ar-Rahman, He is ar-Rahim. And then I heard Salahuddin say Sahih, correct. When Salahuddin heard these verses, he said correct, that this is correct what Allah is saying. And before that, he was like on his deathbed, so his mind wasn't working. So previously his mind wasn't like, was a bit absent. But when he heard these verses, it was as if his mind, came back into action. He said Sahih is correct, and then after that he died. And he was buried in a place called As-Saffa. And the people, they said that they wept so much. The people, they wept so much that it was as if the whole world was weeping in one voice, in chorus. That is how much the people, they wept on the death of Salahuddin. And not only the Muslims, even his European enemies, even the Christians, the Crusaders, the ones who he had fought for many years, even they mourned his loss. They were grieved when they heard of the death of Salahuddin. Why? Because they knew that Salahuddin, he used to always keep his word. He used to fulfill his covenant. If he made any agreement with the Crusaders, he would stick to it. He would never break his side of the agreement. If he promised them safe passage, they would be guaranteed safe passage. If he said nobody was going to, attack them in certain place, then nobody would attack them. He would keep his word. And unfortunately today, we find that even the ordinary Muslim, he can't keep his covenant. Even the ordinary Muslim, forget about the rulers, even the ordinary Muslim. If you go to a shop, to buy something from an ordinary Muslim, the chances are that, he'll probably sell you a defective good. And he won't tell you the truth. It'll be a defective good, and he'll just try and say, yes, inshallah, mashallah, brother, don't worry, inshallah, there's nothing wrong with this, please, buy it. And he won't tell you. Or they'll break their promises. Like some Muslim, you hear some stories that one Muslim, he agreed to sell his house to another brother at a particular price. Price was fixed, everything. Then that brother who was buying the house, he's ringing that brother, he's saying, brother, we've agreed the price now, when are we going to complete the deal? And the brother's ignoring him and avoiding him. Then once he catches him, he finds out that after they had agreed the deal, after they had agreed the price, somebody else came to that Muslim and said to him, I'll pay you more for it. So he said, I'm not selling it to you anymore, I want to sell it to him. What type of fulfilling of the covenant is this? What type of truthfulness is this? But look at Salahuddin, as a Muslim ruler, even his enemies, they said that they were sad because of how truthful he was in fulfilling his covenants. And to end with, I will finish with the opening couplet of a poem by the scholar Ash-Shatani. And he made a poem about Salahuddin, and the first couple of lines are as follows. أرى النصر مقرونا برايتك الصفراء فَسِرْ وَامْلِكِ الدُّنْيَا فَأَنْتَ بِهَا أَحْرَى. I'll read that one more time. أَرَى النَّصْرَ مَقْرُونًا بِرَايَتِكَ الصَّفْرَاء فَسِرْ وَامْلِكِ الدُّنْيَا فَأَنْتَ بِهَا أَحْرَى. Which means, أَرَى النَّصْرَ مَقْرُونًا بِرَايَتِكَ الصَّفْرَاء. That I see victory accompanying your yellow flag. Correct, Ya Ibn Abbas? Ya Ibn Abbas, correct? I see victory accompanying Rayatika Safra, your yellow flag. But is correct translation? Ara Nasra Makrunan Birayatika Safra. I see victory, wherever I see your yellow flag, maybe he had a yellow standard, a yellow flag. I see your yellow flag, wherever your yellow flag goes, I see victory coming next to it, side by side. In other words, wherever you go with your flag, victory comes with it, O Salahuddin. Wherever you go for battle, wherever you take your golden standard or your yellow flag, the victory is always there. I see the victory accompanies your yellow flag. فَسِرْ وَامْلِكِ الدُّنْيَا فَأَنْتَ بِهَا أَحْرَى. So go forth and go forth and possess the world. Go forth, O Salahuddin, go forth, set out forth and take the whole world under your possession. فَأَنْتَ بِهَا أَحْرَى. Because you are more deserving of it. You are the one who deserves to possess the world, in terms of the rulership on the earth. You are the one who is the most deserving of it. So, فَسِرْ وَامْلِكِ الدُّنْيَا. Go forth and own the world because you are more suited to it. أَرَى النَّصْرَ مَقْرُونًا بِرَايَتِكَ الصَّفْرَاء فَسِرْ وَامْلِكِ الدُّنْيَا فَأَنْتَ بِهَا أَحْرَى. And I would just like to finish with one thing. That many people, you hear them saying today that, we need Salahuddin today, If only we had a Salahuddin today. Many people, you hear them saying that. Some people that say, it's my wish that we have somebody like Salahuddin today who will come and who will liberate Jerusalem just like that Salahuddin did it, for so on and so forth. And you might ask yourself that, where is the Salahuddin of today? I will say to the brothers, that the reason you don't have a Salahuddin today, because if Salahuddin came today, nobody would follow him. Nobody would follow him, I guarantee you. If there was a man like Salahuddin today, and you can see with your eyes what happened, in the last, year, when certain personalities, they came up, who went to answer their call? Hardly anybody went to answer their call. So what do you think? Tomorrow when Salahuddin comes, the whole Ummah will stand up and support him? No. That is why we don't have a Salahuddin today, because if Allah gives us a Salahuddin today, we will not be there to back him up, and that is the reason we don't have a Salahuddin today. And when we'll be ready to back up such a person, then that person will come. And maybe some of those people are alive today, but the reason their name is not big is because the Ummah is not, has let them down and has deceived, left them in the lurch. So may Allah have mercy on Salahuddin, and may Allah enter him into the highest parts of